Hello and welcome to Speed Bumps with Charlie Kimball. I'm going to be your host, Charlie Kimball, and this is episode 1. So I first want to start with who I am, what I've done in racing, in health, in my life, where I've been throughout the world, and also where we're going on this podcast, why I want to share my story, and talk to other people and hear their stories as well. I've always been around racing. My dad's family has been in farming here in California in Ventura County for generations. In fact, my sister and I are 6th-generation farmers. And at the same time, my dad grew up enjoying engineering. He, in high school, got into the soapbox derby, and that sparked a love of engineering in him. He went to college and started working in racing and designed race cars. In fact, he helped design the 1980 and 1982 Indy 500 race winning cars, and then got a job offer and moved then my mom, my sister, and himself to England to go work in Formula One. I was born over there. So I grew up watching racing. We used to watch the Formula One Grand Prix on Sunday morning to try and catch a glimpse of my dad on TV. We lived in England, lived in Italy when he worked at the Ferrari Formula One team, and then moved back to the US. And it was back here in Southern California that my passion and love for motorsports really started. I started racing go-karts at the age of 9. And it really started as a way for my dad and I to spend some time together on the weekends. We would throw the go-kart in the back of the pickup, go to the go-kart track, and my mom and sister would come out, and it was a lot of fun. But it turns out I was pretty good at it. So pretty soon we had more go-karts and bigger trailers. And we weren't just driving 20 minutes down the road to the go-kart track. We were driving a couple hours up the road to Santa Maria, to Bakersfield, San Diego, Riverside, Vegas, 8 hours to Phoenix, Northern California, even doing go-kart races in the Midwest, the East Coast, down in Florida, up in Canada at the Barrie Grand Prix. So racing really started to get into my blood. And from there, when I turned 16, as every 16-year-old, at least who has a car aficionado bend to them like myself, I got my driver's license. So for my 16th birthday, my parents gave me a 2-day test in a Formula Ford. And a Formula Ford's kind of an open-wheeled race car, but an entry-level open-wheeled race car. It sees a top speed of about 100, 120 miles an hour, maybe. Still pretty quick, faster than you should ever go on the road. But as far as race cars go, it's an entry level. And I remember my first day in that car like it was yesterday. I remember coming in after my first 10 laps and thinking, that's exactly what I want to do in life. That's where life starts to make sense, is when I'm in a race car. So I remember that day like it was yesterday, and that's when it really got into my blood. From there, continued through high school. My parents always had a rule. They said, bees don't race in high school. They said you have to continue to work hard in school, get good grades, because if driving doesn't work out for a living, they wanted me to be able to go to college and get a degree and do something I loved with a college degree. And for me, that was working in racing. I really wanted to go and get my engineering degree. But I'll admit, I got a couple B's in high school. I'm a math science guy. My dad's an engineer. My mom's a mathematician. I got 2 B's in English. So I figured genetics were not on my side for those classes. But upon graduating from high school, I got into Stanford University for their engineering program. And my friends all thought I was crazy, but I turned them down. And I moved to Europe on my own to go race cars. And having grown up there, I had a lot of family friends there. In fact, my sister was working over there already in motorsports. So she and I shared a house and worked together. And then I raced in the British Formula Ford Championship, did pretty well, moved up to the British Formula 3 series, was the first American in over a decade to win a British Formula 3 race, was doing really well, raced in 2006 in the Formula 3 Euro Series race. And it was at that point that it started to look like this could become a career. So in 2007, I was racing the World Series by Renault and that ladder, that Formula 2.5 level, similar to an Indy Next car here in the US. And things were going pretty well, at least to start the season. But then in the second half of the year, if you'll pardon the pun, things started to go off track a little bit. And I realized that I had this skin rash. And so I booked in to go see the doctor. And I went in and said, "Hey, doc, I got the skin rash going on. Can you help me?" It's kind of annoying. He said, "Yep, no problem. Here's some cream that'll clear that up. Is there anything else going on in your health you want to ask me about?" I said, "Nah, I'm 22." Like being 22 meant that nothing else could go wrong. And I said, "Well, I've been drinking a fair bit of water. Do I have too much salt in my diet?" He said, "Well, how much water is a fair bit of water?" I said, "Oh, I'm drinking 8, 10 bottles of water a night. I have to go to the bathroom all the time." I remember clearly I was driving from London Heathrow Airport back to near Oxford where I lived, and it was about an hour and 15 drive. And the night before I went in to see the doctor, I'd stopped twice to fill up my water bottle and go to the bathroom. And he said, "Okay, well, have you lost any weight recently?" And I was weighed just 5 days earlier at the racetrack, so I knew what I was supposed to weigh. And when I stood on his scales, being in England, I'd lost 12 kilos, 12 kilograms, which here in the US translates to about 25 pounds in 5 days. And I remember thinking, okay, either his scale's broken or something's really going on here. And he said, I want to do some more tests, but I think you have diabetes. And I went, okay, what's that? What does that mean? And he explained that I have type 1 diabetes, and it meant that my pancreas was no longer naturally producing insulin that would allow me to process carbohydrates into my cells for energy. And so my body was trying to flush that extra sugar out of itself with the water, and I was losing weight because my body was eating itself to try and have the energy to just go through daily life, let alone be an athlete. So he sent me to the diabetes center in Oxford, and I remember asking the doctor if I'd ever drive again. And there are moments, at least as a kid, I remember I used to try and figure out if it was better to beg forgiveness or ask permission. And in this case, I realized I didn't know enough about diabetes to know if I'd ever get healthy enough, strong enough, safe enough to get back in a race car. And so I asked him, and he said, "I don't see any reason why not. There are incredible people doing amazing things with diabetes all over the world. You may have to change how you go about it, but it shouldn't slow you down." Now, slowing down was not something I had in my plan. So figuring out how to get back in a race car, get healthy, get strong, and get back on the racetrack was my number one goal. I was diagnosed October 16th of 2007, and I got back in a race car for the first time in March of 2008. And in that first race, I finished second, finished on the podium, second out of 30 of the best young drivers in the world at the time. And I remember standing up on that podium, kissing that trophy very vividly. I remember it. And I remember thinking, not only was I the same driver as I was before I was diagnosed, I think I was better because of it, because each corner, each lap, each race meant more to me now than it ever had before. So it meant that I was still able to chase and continue my dream of driving race cars professionally. Fast forward to 2009, I moved back to the US, back to North America, and race in what was called the Indy Lights, is now Indy Next, for 2 years. First with a team that doesn't exist anymore, Team PBIR, and then second year with Andretti Autosport, and started a partnership, actually, I will say very clearly at the beginning of 2009 with the company that makes the insulin that I've always used to manage my blood glucose, my blood sugar, and that I use to this day. And so started with them in 2009, 2011, signed with Chip Ganassi Racing for an expansion team for them. They had 2 cars. They added 2 for myself and Graham Rahal. I drove the number 83 car my rookie season in the Indycar series, made history as the first licensed driver with diabetes to race in the Indianapolis 500. My first year, I finished 13th in the Indy 500. My first race in IndyCar, I ended up in the wall, but also had a top 10 just a couple of months later. So that was the start of my IndyCar career. And the last time I raced in an IndyCar was in 2021 at the Long Beach Grand Prix. And over 10-year period, I've competed in over 150 IndyCar races, made history as the first licensed driver with diabetes to win an IndyCar race when I won at Mid-Ohio back in 2013. I still hold the track record at Texas Motor Speedway. Was also part of a team in 2013. Myself and 3 other drivers won the 24 hours of Daytona, the Rolex 24 at Daytona. So I have a really cool watch from that, and also a great story about racing through the night, twice around the clock. I remember waking up Sunday morning thinking, okay, it's like we've gone into the night, through the night, and the sun's coming up. We got to be getting close. And thinking we had 9 hours left and still had 3 Indianapolis 500s to go. Now I live back here in California, lived in Indiana during most of my full-time IndyCar career. I have been all over the world, raced on every continent except Africa and Antarctica, raced in Asia, obviously in Europe, South America, a couple of times in Brazil, and all across North America. I've gotten to travel a lot through racing, meet a lot of really cool people. And every time I find that I find that every time I meet somebody new, especially from a different walk of life, if it's different sports or different business or different academia, whatever that is, I always find that I leave those conversations inspired. I find that I learn something from them. There's always something interesting to share. If it's, how they go about it, their mindset, their training, their nutrition, and especially people within the type 1 diabetes community, the diabetes community as a whole. Anytime I have conversations with them, I find that I come away just completely re-inspired to contribute to the community and to rededicate myself to my diabetes management. So that's really why I wanted to share my story on this Speed Bumps podcast. You may be thinking, okay, speed bumps, that's not really a racing driver thing. Well, getting diagnosed for me was a speed bump. I don't think anyone would have blamed me if I said, okay, I have diabetes. I don't want to figure out how to drive a race car again. I'm ready to let this be a detour and find something else I loved and was passionate about in life. But I turned what could have been a roadblock into a speed bump. And it slowed me down for a little bit, but I got back up to speed and sort of down the path towards living my dream in racing. And so that's really where the name came from. It's episode 1. We'll see if that changes. But I'd like to go through this podcast and interview and talk to other people, talk to them about speed bumps they've faced in life, about maybe changing mindsets within a locker room or a training room, about nutrition, or within the sports world in general, sort of the broader sports world, that motorsports athletes are athletes. Talk to a couple of racing drivers, hopefully hear what they thought of racing with me as somebody with diabetes and what they've faced in their life, their careers, and how it's evolved them as an athlete, as a person, and what that means for when they tell their story, what other people really enjoy about it. So I hope you'll come along for the ride. Don't forget, you can find Speed Bumps with Charlie Kimball wherever you get your podcasts. Ideally, I'll be doing these with video and uploading them to my YouTube channel. So you can like and subscribe there. You can subscribe to the podcast, rate it, let me know any comments, questions. Eventually, I think every maybe 10 episodes or so, I'll do a full Q&A episode and read through a bunch of different comment questions and hopefully answer them to the best of my ability. Circle back with some guests and try and get their answers if you have questions for them as well. Also, you can follow me on social media at Charlie Kimball on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram. Thanks for listening and potentially watching, and we'll see you next time.